Good evening, everyone. I'm Omar Acevedo, and I'm the Literary Program Coordinator at the Mark Twain House and Museum. I'm delighted to introduce this evening's program on behalf of our museum here in Hartford, Connecticut. The Mark Twain House and Museum's virtual programs are produced in part with support honoring Frank Lord, a beloved trustee of the museum who passed away a few years ago. We're happy to honor his memory with these programs. We're also incredibly grateful to the Wish You Well Foundation and Connecticut Public WNPR for supporting tonight's program and all our other virtual programs. A little bit of a tongue twister there. Tonight, we are welcoming Alex Jennings and Nikki Woolfolk for a discussion of Alex's new book, The Ballad of Perilous Graves. We will be posting the link to purchase a copy of The Ballad of Perilous Graves from our store in the chat throughout tonight's program. Please feel free to have your own conversations in the chat alongside our guests' discussion. But if you have any specific question for Alex and Nikki, you can post that directly into our Q&A section. So talk in the chat and questions in the Q&A. Please note that you can click on live transcript down below in the center, at the bottom center of the screen to get down to to see live auto captioning for this event. I'm getting ahead of myself tonight. Now that I've said all that I want to get down to formally introduce our guests for tonight. Our moderator is Nikki Woolfolk. They are a professional chocolatier, published author of short and long fiction, a public speaker, and a fixture within certain fandom and convention-based communities. Proud Blerd and self-proclaimed queen of the side-eye, they sculpt decadent desserts and fantastical fiction with equal skill and flair. Our author is Alex Jennings. He is a writer, editor, teacher, and poet who constantly devours pop culture and writes mostly jokes on Twitter. He was born in Germany and raised in Botswana, Tunisia, Suriname, and the US. He is currently living in New Orleans. The Ballad of Perilous Graves is his debut novel. And now that I've made the proper introductions, I'll turn it over to Alex and Nikki.
Thank you so much, Omar. That was a very nice introduction. I appreciate it. And I have to say, I said it before, I'll say it again. I am so excited, so excited, like over the moon to be able to talk with you. I devoured your book. It is a thing of beauty. And I'm amazed that I get to speak with you. And I cannot wait for other people to discover your work. And for those that have already discovered his work, definitely ask more questions, definitely tell your friends, sing praises. I know that I'm saying all the things that you're supposed to say at the end. We're going to say it at the beginning, and then we're going to say it at the end. It's going to be a nice bookmark of things. So that being said, welcome, and thank you for doing this interview.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So first things first, playlist. Give us a playlist. I know that I know it's a lot to ask, but I was just like,
okay,
the music.
now,
yeah.
There is a Spotify playlist to go along with the book. And let me see where the best place is to put the link.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see. Oh, I'm on the spot.
It's okay. It's okay. I won't put you too much on the spot, but as far as there is one, if you want to tweet about it, when we're done with this, I'm going to be following you anyway. So I will tweet that. You will tweet that. We'll tweet that. We'll get the word out there, because I love listening to music, whether I'm writing or whether I'm reading, and especially knowing that the author has picked out something that fits the mood. Because you, out of everybody, you know your own work and you know what will work best as far as the tunes. So thank you.
Well, I've got the link. Let me see if I can put it in the chat. Let's see. There we go.
Ooh, thank you.
Yeah, it was really fun to put together. Like the hard part was choosing only like 25 songs. Because I
Oh.
very much listened to a lot of music when I'm link didn't go to everybody. Let me see. Okay, that's for the host and panelists. Let me go to everyone and try it again. There we go. Okay.
All right. So you were saying about, you know, the soreness of picking out 25 songs, but at the same time, they're probably like, you know, they had to edge themselves and really tell you how important they were to what you were doing. So did you base the music collection on the chapters or the mood or characters?
I based the music selections on the overall feel, and I listened to a lot of music while I was writing, because in a lot of ways, the process of discovering this book coincided with the process of my discovering New Orleans and how to live in it and how to integrate myself into the fabric of the city. And so music was a major part of that from the very start. Since long, long before I even knew where New Orleans was or had an inkling of the rich culture and heritage of the place, you know, when I was, I don't know, 4 or 5, I heard Iko Iko, and I had no idea where it was from or what any of it meant or like what the nonsense words were about. And I even remember thinking that it must be Hawaiian or something. And
Yeah.
I asked my mother about it, and she took me to the bookstore in the mall, and we asked a lady there about it, and she showed me this picture book about the Mardi Gras Indians, and I was blown away. Like I've still never lost that sense of awe, especially when it comes to the Mardi Gras Indians. Like it's kind of like sighting a big cat on the street.
Yeah.
Because they just have these like just beautiful, beautiful handmade suits where they look like sea anemones or something, walking on
Yeah.
land, and it's just such a great tradition.
It was beautifully done. A lot of times when I'm reading work and they'll have lyrics, it's like, okay, I'm reading the lyrics and whatnot, but I can't hear it. Like I can't find the beat. But the way that your work is, prior to you giving the lyrics, you know, you already have your own rhythm, the style of your work, you know, the way that each character has their own rhythm. I hear it in a beat, a tone. And then when you have the music on top of it, it just layers it more. And I found that amazing. Oh goodness, I had a question. This is bad when the person's supposed to ask questions and they forget the question. But anyway, so it was just, I find that is very telling, especially you bringing back something from your childhood, because I found that your connection with Perry, being able to write from a young fellow, a child's perspective, and put that, you know, the fears there, but at the same time, there's a bit of a, you know, hero there too, even though obviously he doesn't believe he's a hero, but just for him to be so brave and take on, you know, this quest and knowing it's a quest. I've got to say, I don't want to spoil anything, obviously, but one of the things that came to my attention on how you wrote this, you wrote with community as a theme. A lot of times with stories, we know the hero's story. We know that, you know, they're going to deny the call, and then they're going to, you know, say yes to the call, and then these wonderful quests will happen. What I found interesting about your work is that you showed us why this place is worth saving. It wasn't just, oh, it's New Orleans, but here are the people that are worth saving. here is the community that is worth saving. And it really, like, I have my own favorite character, well, characters. Obviously you connected with each one of your characters, but when it came to the beginning of your work, and then when you finally finished, like when it came to the proofing, I don't mean like the first draft, I mean like when you've looked at this book a bazillion times, when you started it to where you finally finished it, which character were you most surprised by their growth? Like what surprised you in that manner when you were writing? Because my guess is that you knew where you wanted to go, but by the end, you know, which character surprised you?
That's a really good question. I'd say, I think Perry still takes the top spot on that, just by the fact that I had been working on the book for years before I realized that Perry was an imagined version of what my own father was like at that age. And
wow.
Honestly, when the realization hit me, I became very afraid, and I had to stop writing for a while because I knew what I was going to have to put him through, and I just didn't feel like I was writer enough to pull that off. But the good thing about these situations is that sometimes the work can transform you into the person that you need to be in order to execute it. And I think that's definitely what happened to me.
And as a parent, it was hard to read and it was wonderful to read. I think that was another thing that really made me a cheerleader for your book. Usually in magical, mystical, mythical stories, the parents are either dead or they're horrible. There is no in between. And you wrote the parents as so supportive. Like, what moved you to go in that direction? Because like I said, a lot of times, you know, we read these fantasy stories where it, you know, the parents are one way. What moved you to bring this in a different direction?
Well,
What inspired you?
many of the characters in my book are based on my own family, especially like the core family characters. And my parents have been very supportive of me over the years, but there have also been times when we didn't understand each other, times when we didn't know each other's perspective well enough to predict or even understand our behavior. And so I knew that I did not want Perry and Brindy's parents to be the enemy, certainly. And I also knew that there was going to be a point where they were beyond their parents' help. And it felt really necessary for me to dramatize that in this story in order to honor my own family and the life of the city. Because the book was actually born out of moving to New Orleans in the summer of 2006 and hearing and reading a lot of stories about children who were forced to return to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina and fend for themselves without their parents. So of course that automatically made me think of Pippi Longstocking and what she would be like if she was a redbone girl living in uptown New Orleans. And it also made me want to draw down on the very realistic dynamics and emotions that are at play when a decision so serious is made and when kids are put in that kind of position.
Thank you. Especially with, you know, obviously lack of support on all levels. I mean, adults having lack of support is just absolutely dire. And then to put children in that is horrible. Yeah, I love that you went back with talking about Katrina, talking about the storm. I have family in Louisiana, so that really that hit home. My son was born a year after, and so there is that connection, and obviously the family and whatnot. He's been back, but I have not. there's so many amazing things in your work. And speaking about Louisiana, one of the things, I mean, I was telling somebody today at the library, I said, not only when you're reading this, I said, you can see it, you can hear it. I said, you can smell it. I said, just the way that this man writes, it's just beautiful. But I was really appreciative that you did not put the smell of part of Port Allen, because the refinery does not smell so nice. So I was like, thank you so much. I don't need to have that relive that memory. Out of all the memories, I'm like, that's the not so nice smell. So thank you. I was like, he got it right. Thank you very much. But thank you for like leaving certain smells out. Sorry. But coming from, you know, family that is from that area, from Louisiana, especially different parishes, I was wondering, you know, since you were born in another area and then you made your home here in the States, especially New Orleans, have you been made aware of different tall tales? And if so, which one or which ones have really, have you found interesting, or at least something that you want to explore, whether it be now or something in the future? Or is that a bit presumptuous?
The Boudreaux and Thibodeau jokes are very important to me. I actually wrote a story called Boudreaux and Thibodeau years ago that was published by Albedo 2.0's Irish SF showcase. I just love that stuff. I love the stories that come out of like Cajun and Creole culture. There was just a lot of reading of ghost stories, of legends from in and around the area, and it all kind of melded together and really helped to flavor the book. Because I think of stories like that similarly to the way I think of music. Henry Louis Gates wrote about the process of what he calls signifying, where people will take snatches of stories or material that they've heard elsewhere and then reiterate it and comment on it at the same time to create a new and very much living whole. And you know, that's a major feature of jazz music, as well as storytelling, especially in the Black vernacular tradition. And so that was very important to me. And then, of course, you know, certain things that kind of transcend location in Black America, like the legend of Stagger Lee. You know, that original murder was very place-based. It took place in East St. Louis in 1900, but over the years, it's gained such a legendary status and influenced both Black culture and the superculture as a whole in so many ways that I knew I had to include it here. But it was pretty terrifying to do, honestly.
You did so beautifully. It scares me. I tell people all the time, you know, I'm so afraid. I don't read horror, I don't watch horror. And then like 2 minutes later, I'm watching and reading stuff with horror in it. And I'm like, maybe I need to really confront myself in the mirror and really have a talk, because clearly, even if it scares me, I'm still reading it. It's still, you know, and it brings that reflective back. That was one of the things I noticed too, when you brought nightmares into, you know, the worlds of the main characters. And you did the universal nightmare. So you had, you know, these big bads there, but at the same time, you have these individual nightmares. And I've got to say, there was you know, in the beginning of the book, I really had to take a moment, because Casey is like the character that I connected with so much. And I was wonderfully surprised. I was overjoyed. I was so giddy. Like it was ridiculous. Thank you. Thank you for writing Casey. But especially Casey's nightmare of, you know, things coming back that shouldn't be there. It just, I was horrified. I was sympathetic. And it was like that's just it was a wonderful way to convey that level of nightmare. And it just, I want to ask how, but it's just, it's not the right question. Like I'm at a lack of words for you for this part, but
Well, I guess,
sorry. I'm just so amazed.
I mean, I guess it's important to note that I do consider nightmares in some way to be a blessing, um, just because I feel like they allow me in my own life to see the most outlandish of threat scenarios. And like two of the major nightmare sequences in the book are lifted whole cloth from nightmares that I had. The one with Casey earlier on, that's directly from my own life while I was working on the book. And the big one with Perry later on down the line, and the judge, like that's another one that was a nightmare that I had.
Yeah, you mentioning that, I still get goosebumps. I'm just like gonna sleep with the lights on. Like it just, it like I said, it's universal enough. And at the same time, it was so, it felt personal. And I was like, clearly somebody is reading my journal and I really need you to step away. It's like, dear sir, could you please? Sir. But yeah, I didn't expect it. And a lot of times when we're reading horror or we're reading, anything that has to do with the magical, there seems to sometimes be a lack of the humanity, that fear-based, that is something, the secret that we don't allow ourselves to reveal to our own selves. So being able to read from that perspective, you made it more personal, for that. One of the things I didn't expect is you went into the beauty of tagging. So the whole aspect of, graffiti and I wanted to, like, the way that you described it was so rich, but at the same time, I'm kind of curious, and I'm like, I wonder if he has any sort of like Pinterest screenshots, something, anything as far as what inspired you, because I wish that I could see the fantastical that doesn't exist, but the way that you described it, it was like, oh, I wish I could see that with things hovering where it looks 3D or holographic when it's not. Like,
Well,
what moved you to do that?
Well, a lot of what inspired that was just street art that I've seen around town over the years. There are real street artists mentioned in the book. Freya, for instance, Resner. I just love to see people interacting with the urban environment in that way and giving themselves a voice when they don't necessarily have a voice in other areas of their life. And so there's an Instagram account that I follow called Nola Graffiti, and a lot of the really good graffiti here in town appears there. But the idea of graffiti tags just sitting on the air like that, that's something that just popped into my mind out of nowhere. I honestly don't know where that came from. And there's a lot of material like that in the book. And I think it's similar to the nightmares for me because, the sheer boundless imagination of dream has given rise to so much, both in my career and in my personal life. Like for instance, like the version of the Canaries that's in the book, that's something that I 100% dreamed. I got to visit there. And, you know, for many years, I would think back to that dream and just like the sound of the water was something that's been very comforting and stabilizing for me. And, it's that other side of the nightmare coin. And I treasure it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I'm sensing a theme that you're connected to, different deities, water deities. And there's been a lot of talk in the culture right now, especially on Twitter, about, I don't know, things about mermaids. Just gonna put that out there. Any chance that, you'll be working with stories that lean even heavier into pretty much, I wouldn't say just water deities, but in a way, it's like I see with this particular story with Perry, on land, and I'm wondering, will you be moving into, exploring water aspects of, tall tales, nightmares, blessings, curses, hope, faith?
I mean, I absolutely will. We haven't seen the last of the undersea kingdom of Grand Lau. That's a very important place for me. It's named after a village in the Ivory Coast that was, due to climate change, swallowed by the waves. And that just makes me think of like how much of our experience and our past has been lost, and is it really lost, and how does it connect to the rest of our experience, and how can it be used to make a metaphoric statement about Blackness and the gift and the millstone that it has been throughout our history. So yeah, I'll definitely be back at that.
I'm so happy to hear that. It's like, I usually hate it when people are like, is there a sequel? But I'm like, I'm going to be that person. Is there a sequel? So thank you for indulging me.
Well, we don't have direct sequels planned. Like the novel is a standalone, but it'll definitely connect to other works for sure.
And I am there for that. It doesn't even have to be a sequel. I'm here for whatever world you want to share, whichever, you want to gift to us. It was definitely, I knew that the book was going to be good, but I didn't expect it to resonate so much. It's one of those where there's a thing that I started with my partner where I read stories at night. Because I was like, we read stories to kids at night. Like, why can't we just do it as adults where we have like story time? so I read various stories, and it's one of those where I cannot wait to read this one out loud, to be scared along with someone, and at the same time be able to have this conversation and conversations, because there's so much level of depth to this story. What would you like people to understand about this particular piece?
I think the most important thing that I want people to understand is that the story is not designed to leave anyone behind, but there are places where if you are not steeped in the knowledge and tradition and culture of New Orleans, it might take a while to get the hang of what's going on. But what I was looking to do was recreate the feeling that I used to get when I was 6 or 7 and would pick up a Marvel comic. And I didn't always have access to them. So I might be picking up issue 6 of a 12-issue series for the first time. And I'd be saying to myself, okay, well, this guy seems cool. I don't know what his history is with this other guy, but it's very intriguing, and hopefully someday I can come back and fill in the blanks. So I really want people to give it time to wash over them. And it's kind of designed so that if you Google certain things, if you come back and take a look at it again, it comes across a little bit more clearly in some ways. That's the most important thing that I want people to know.
Nice. And I definitely, to piggyback on what you've said, I would encourage people to keep like a little notebook and pen handy. And literally, when it's like you come through, when you're reading over a sentence and it's like, okay, well, that sounds familiar, or that doesn't sound familiar, write it down, keep on going. And the factor that the way you're writing is you're giving people something new and fresh. And if they know about it, that's wonderful. If they don't, even though they may not know about it, you you still, the way that you write, you still invite them into the story anyway. It's like, instead of leaving people out on a joke, you've brought them into that. And there's a lot of humor in your work. And I think that's also why I would love for more people to discover it. When it comes to writing horror, when it comes to writing in this variation, there's not as much humor. And I think that your pacing about it, as well as just adding this level of levity, you know, this lightness during these really hard times and these really hard situations for these kids, for the adults, it's something to be said. And I didn't feel, I felt like I was in the middle of that quest, but at the same time, I think readers will find they're not going to be emotionally weighed down in a way where they finish the book and they're just like, you know, in a negative way, what do I do with my life? Instead, I finish the book and I'm like, what do I do with my life? Let me go back and read this again, because I didn't want to leave this world that you have created. It's partially, I could see some of it from my own family history where I was like, yes, he got it. Like he understood that. Yeah. And I remember that. And oh yeah, he totally got that part right. And yeah, but then there are other parts where it was like, okay, that's not familiar to me. And I wanted to learn more. And then there were things that were like, oh, I think that this is, you know, something, you know, that he, you know, he's made up, and I want to know more. So it just, who has influenced you in really expressing yourself in your writing, not just your writing, but also in your creative life outside of your writing realm?
My God, so many people. I've had so much help and so much kindness along the way. I'd say the first person to sort of connect my real day-to-day lived life with the speculative fiction that I had been reading and fell in love with was probably Octavia Butler. I you know, when we were living in Suriname in the 90s when I was a kid, the only place to get English language books in town was the community liaison library at the American Embassy. And they had all of these back issues of like Asimov's magazine and like SF paperbacks. And I picked up a copy of Dawn. And this is back when they were still trying to disguise the fact that Octavia was Black. So, you know, there's a white woman on the cover.
Yes, I remember.
Right. And like, as I'm reading it, it starts to sink in like, no, wait, these are Black people being described here. And so she was the first person who really brought that possibility home to me, because I had encountered some of Chip Delaney's work before, but while his cast is kind of diverse, like he very much wants to let racial identity take a back seat to what's going on. And so it didn't occur to me that he might be Black at first. But then when I was going to the Evergreen State College in the early 2000s, Octavia came and spoke to my writing class there, and her ride was late picking her up, and so she sat in the writing center where I worked for about 2 hours, and she spoke to a group of 5 or so of us, and just made herself so available and so kind, and she actually told me directly that if I were to apply to Clarion West, that I would get in. And at the time, like, you know, that hearing that kind of broke my heart, because I was like, you've never read a word that I've written. How do you know that? I could be total trash. And if I apply to this and I don't get in, I'm going to be crushed. But I took the chance and did it anyway. And she was telling the truth. I got in, and it changed my life. And just
That's wonderful.
Like, and that isn't an unusual story for her either. There are so many people out there who had encounters with her and whose imaginations she fired in that way, and it was just beautiful. Victor Laval has also been a major influence. I actually first read Big Machine, his novel, while I was working on this book, and it honestly changed my life and like the way I orient myself toward the city, because inviting people in is a major theme of that book, and also the warning that the despised become despicable. And so I actually just got a hold of an email address for him and wrote to him telling him how much the book meant to me and how important it was to me. And he responded very graciously. He came down for the Tennessee Williams Literary Festival that year and invited me to dinner with a bunch of folks like Roxane Gay and Garnet Cadogan. It was absurd how kind he was to me. And so it's very important to me to pay that fortune forward and to make sure that I make myself available, that I am kind, that I am generous, and that I help people connect not just with my work, but with the world around them in a way that enriches their lives.
Thank you. That is wonderful. Don, the Xenogenesis series was the first series that I ever stumbled upon with Octavia's work, Miss Butler's work, and I read the rest of her work, but for me, that series, yeah, that was so monumental and important. And I'm jealous, but at the same time, I am absolutely amazed and happy that you got to meet her and got to not just meet her, but really connect. I think that it's one of those things where it definitely, it's good to know that it sets you on the course and that you took her advice. You didn't just sit on it, but you actually moved forward and did something that you were afraid to do anyway. That's, you know, just as heroic as Perry, where, you know, here's this young fellow, you know, being tasked to do this amazing thing that's so scary, and at the same time growing out of it and just, you know, finding out more about who he is, that he was always this amazing person. He just didn't know it. He didn't see it as much as other people had seen it. So it sounds like Ms. Butler was the same, where she would see these aspects in people that they didn't see in themselves, and she would just, you know, be that gentle push, or sometimes not so subtle push. So that's good to know.
I really think so. She also had a practice of writing the life she wanted into being, and I think that she lent her hand to other people, like writing other people's writing other people's lives into existence, and I'm
Yes.
grateful for that. But I mean, you know, not just her, but Nisi Shawl has been very kind to me over the years. They're a wonderful person. I've been blessed to work with them and also be their friend. Cherie Renee Thomas, who is just, I mean, I've said many times that Black women are at the bleeding edge of speculative fiction, and she definitely bears that out. The work that she's done for more than 30 years now has been so important to the field and so important to me personally.
Yeah. If it weren't for them, I agree. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't have half the opportunities that have been provided. Yeah, it's one of those things where uplifting, giving hope. I don't know if you have those moments of doubt when you're writing, but I've noticed that even the kindness where people don't even realize like they're saying something kind or they're saying something uplifting, and it's something, you know, kind of an offshoot for them, and they don't realize that it's, you know, holding you up at a time where you just feel like, I don't know if I can, you know, finish this, or I don't know if I, you know, do I have that skill set to move forward? And sometimes we need that. I mean, as people have said, writing is a solitary type of work, but at the same time, we do need that support. We need that level. So, you know, being able to have that support with your writing, you know, colleagues, and not only seeing that, but, you know, I agree. I'm seeing a lot more spotlight being shined on, you know, Black sci-fi writers and Black horror writers, and that's been a long time coming. And I'm happy to see that. So it's wonderful to hear not only are you talking about those that have uplifted you, but you are also reaching back and also uplifting others. So that's wonderful. And I hope it continues, because it just, there's that level of hope. Once again, tying it back to your stories, that level of community. I was telling, my spouse, I said, the thing about this book that I said, out of everything, I said, yes, I know I've been gushing about it to the point where I just won't shut up. I said, but the beauty is that you see what is worth fighting for. And it's this community. You have shown so much light on these different aspects of people, and to know that they are reflections of your family. And I'm so happy to know that you've got like this amazing support and this amazing family, but also too, to see, we can see people in our own personal lives that may fit, oh, we got a Peaches in our life. We got a, Perry in our life. We got a Brindy in our life, that aspect. And to be able to see that, and you just lifted it up. Like, I just felt more hope. And that was something that I think that we need to see a little bit more of, because it's really easy for us to, kind of fold in on ourselves, as well as to see all the negative. And you were like, yeah, once again, like you had said about the nightmares, there's this aspect of the nightmare, which is really hard to take, but then there's the flip side. So, right. Having you come back into that and just seeing it, put into print form, put into ebook form, has been amazing to read. Clearly this is a cheerleading moment for you. So I am happy to sing your praises. Is there anything that you would like the creatives to know, or anything that you'd like to impart your wisdom as a wise person to share with them, the way that Miss Octavia Butler had done for you? Is there anything that you would like to share for the person that has their doubts today?
Well, I think the major thing is that there are times, as you are trying to put your work together, as you're trying to put one foot in front of the other, where you have a come to Jesus moment with yourself and you ask yourself, am I capable of doing this? And sometimes the very clear, very honest answer comes back, no. But that doesn't mean that you should stop, because it is possible to transcend your inabilities and your incapabilities and push through to the other side and take that level up that can be so hard to get to. And I feel like that happened to me many times over the course of putting this novel together. Like when I started this book, it was beyond me. It was not something that I could create. And now it's here.
And thank you for that. And thank you for your words. I believe I'm going to rewatch this and just take all your words and put them in my little pocket and save them for the rainy days. Thank you very, very much. I was wondering if you wanted to open it up to questions now.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, let's see what we've got. All right, somebody is Nina Hoffman says, this is your debut novel and the writing and observations are so lush and rich and powerful. Have you done other writing before?
Oh, yes. I've been publishing speculative fiction since 2005. I went to Clarion West in 2003, and they say it takes 2 years to digest what you've learned. And that was certainly the case for me. I've mostly been publishing in like the small presses and sort of out of the way anthologies. And then in 2012, I released my debut collection, which is sadly out of print now. But, I think there's 13 or 14 stories in there that I really love. And one of the things that was kind of painful about putting that out in 2012 was that by the time that book was released, I had kind of leveled up from there. So I felt like the work in it wasn't representative of what I was capable of anymore. But I've done some work since then. I've had some stories on Podcastle, which is a wonderful, wonderful audio podcast that puts out fantasy stories. It's part of a network where there's that podcast, there's Pseudopod, their horror story podcast, there's Escape Pod for science fiction. I think there's even one that's just for cat stories, and there's also one for like YA speculative fiction called Cast of Wonders. But they're wonderful. I've had some stories out in really weird places like Current Affairs, the socialist magazine. I had a story come out there last year called Them Doghead Boys. It's a horror story set in the neighborhood of New Orleans where I used to live. And I would love for more people to see that. It's available online. Pretty much all of these are. And then I have a story forthcoming in an anthology called Africa Risen, edited by Zelda Knight and Cherie Renee Thomas and Donald Ekpeki Ogunechobwe. And I'm so excited about that. Oh, and then, Nisi Shaw edited New Sons, speculative fiction by people of color. The first volume of that came out a few years ago, and there's a new volume coming out next year, and I have a story in that as well, and I'm super excited about it. And then there's some secret projects that I can't talk about just yet in the hopper.
I want to hear about the secret projects, but I will refrain from bothering you, but this is wonderful. Yes, definitely. Oh, somebody has asked that you give a quick rundown of what your debut novel is about. It's a story of Perry. So what's the best way to describe it?
Well, at its heart, it's a sort of blaxploitation Pippi Longstocking adventure through a hallucinatory version of New Orleans where music is a type of sorcery, and 9 songs have escaped from Dr. Professor's enchanted piano and manifested around the city as colorful street people. And then failed magician Perilous Graves has to find and capture the songs before the city crumbles. Meanwhile, Casey Ravel, a trans man who left New Orleans ahead of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, has returned to town and is coming to terms with the fact that his street art has always been a little bit unusual, and that there might be magic involved. And those two stories intertwine and come together for, what I hope is an explosive conclusion.
Just buy the book. just get the book and ask your libraries for it. If you've already read the book, buy it for your friends. These are things that you should do. I don't know if Mr. Alex will say so, but I'm gonna strongly advise that you definitely buy the book. We have it available at through Mark Twain House, so definitely take a look. You will not be disappointed. As he was saying, there is so much to say and so many aspects of these different characters. Like, you really do get to know each one of them, and you get to know what is being saved and how important it is just by looking at these people alone, like just reading from that perspective. Let's see, Casey says there have been so many great movies based in New Orleans, their favorite being Angel Heart. Is there a possibility that this book will be optioned for television or screen? Oh, I like this question. That is my question too.
I mean, there's always the possibility. Like, we've gotten a couple nibbles. Hopefully something will happen with that, and it'll work out to the good. My end is just a writing. Hopefully something else will come out of that. But I also love Angel Heart. I think Angel Heart is actually a better story than the book that it's based on by William Hjortsberg. And the book was good, don't get me wrong, but the book doesn't bring the action to New Orleans and to Louisiana. It stays in New York the whole time, and like, yeah, that's a major influence on me, both the movie and the novel.
Nice, nice. I'm thinking maybe, you know, if somebody knows Jordan Peele, anyone?
Shoot, your lips to God's ears. I would love to work with Jordan Peele. I love his work. I love his perspective on horror. I love the conversations that he's been having with Tananarive Due, who is basically the Black Stephen King.
Yeah.
Just a lovely author who has so much to say about horror and speculative fiction, and has been saying it so eloquently for so many years. If you haven't seen her documentary, horror noir on Shudder, it's very much worth getting into. It's beautiful.
All right. Let's see, any other questions? I don't want to miss anybody else's question. Let's see what we've got. Oh, Jacques, he asks, Alex, can you describe the process of writing, selling, and editing, rewriting your first novel? It seems like a very daunting process.
Oh, absolutely. So the process of writing, my process is a little idiosyncratic because I have kind of a quasi-mystical approach to things. That's not to say the simple act of like training your mind to process ideas properly and to bring them in, and learning technique hasn't been important to me. It definitely has. But I also have some tricks that allow me to sort of finesse my mind into surprising me in some specific ways. One thing I do is when I run into trouble with story problems, I will sit my characters down and interview them. I did not think that that was something that could work for me. It seemed kind of both desperate and twee to me, but when I sat down and did it, it actually worked. There are certainly some scenes in the book where I had to like go out to the courtyard and sit down at an empty table and ask Peaches what happened, and she would actually respond. It was very strange, but so I got the book as close to finished as I possibly could on my own. And I got help from a friend of mine who is a copy editor, Eliane Torres. We went to Clarion West together, and she's brilliant. And once she had helped me kind of refine it at a copy editing level, I started shopping it around to different publishers and agents. And actually, it wasn't until I got an offer from a friend of mine who has a press out in Maryland that was too small for me to take at the time, that I went back and connected with the agents who hadn't already directly told me no, and like explained the situation to them. And Shauna McCarthy of McCarthy Lit said that she'd see what she could do, and immediately started getting results. Like she got the book unrejected at a publisher that had rejected it years before. And this was also when the George Floyd protests were happening, and there was a lot of talk about the publishing paid me hashtag, and a lot of publishers and agents were making overtures to Black authors and Black communities, saying that they wanted to right some of the historic imbalance in the publishing industry. And the sad thing is that a lot of authors found themselves ghosted after the furor died down. And I happened to be one of the ones that didn't happen to. And so I wound up signing with Orbit Books and working with Nivea Evans, who has been truly a godsend. Our first conversation when I was trying to decide between Orbit and another publisher was, was eye-opening and it was very encouraging, and we vibed well together. And she noticed things in the manuscript that nobody else had, and she noticed things about my influences and preoccupations that made me confident that by working together, we could make the book more itself rather than less, and bring it in line with what I really, the statement I really wanted to make. And so once that happened, the novel needed to be grown from the first in an intended trilogy into what it is now. And so she gave me some tips and suggestions for that. And then I sat down and wrote just a terrible garbage draft of the new book that I hated. Like I hated it so much that I didn't really want to show it to her. But she was like, don't worry if it's bad. Like, that's okay. Like, as long as we're moving in the right direction, we can fix bad. Like, just make sure you're kind of hitting the marks that we decided we wanted to hit. And so I turned it in. She gave me some notes back, like an editorial letter, and I went back to work on it. And I called her up and told her, like, I'm not going to make the deadline. I don't think I can do this. There's a pandemic going on. I haven't seen my family in 2 years. I'm going crazy in my little shitbox apartment, and I'm not going to make it. And she talked me down from that, and I actually got the book in on time. And so then we did another couple of drafts together, and it really started to take shape in the way that I wanted it to. And it became something that I'm very proud of. And honestly, I think it's going to be the underpinning, not just of my work that I've published previously, but my work going forward for the rest of my career. And I couldn't have done that without Nivea, another Black woman in the business who is making great strides and doing great things for a great many folks. And I've been so blessed in all this. So my path wasn't totally normal. I feel like my querying skills are still not that strong. I feel like outlining is a weakness for me, but I think my experience goes to show that, like, your path to publication is not about eliminating all the things that you do wrong, but it's about learning to do enough right, learning to have enough successes and strengths that they outweigh your weaknesses and get you where you're trying to go.
Well said. Well said. Oh, okay. Jacques asks, he says, for those of us who are too lazy to Google it, can you define speculative fiction? Thank you, Jacques.
A loaded question. Speculative fiction is basically
he's about to start fights.
Like anything that takes place beyond the borders of what we know to be possible in the world. So that can be science fiction, fantasy, or horror. It can even be some historic fiction that doesn't have fantastic elements in it. It's a very broad category with room for a lot of cross-pollination and improvisation. And that is why it's my home, and I love it so much.
Agreed. Yeah, when it comes to defining speculative fiction, sometimes I'll use the visual of the Twilight Zone, because it had a little bit, it basically like was a soup where it had a little bit of this, a little bit of that, it had a little bit of horror, it had a little bit of science fiction. It always had social commentary, no matter what was going on. So, it's under, that particular umbrella as well. So, yeah.
And like one of the things that I love about it so much is like the mutability inside it. So you can have somebody like Maurice Carlos Ruffin, brilliant author. His first book was called We Cast a Shadow. On its face, it's near future science fiction about a man who is so afraid to raise a black son in America that's not far off from our own that he starts trying to figure out ways to turn his son white. And that book is not marketed as science fiction, it's marketed as literary fiction. And like Maurice has the chops and the expression to pull that off ably, but it's also at its heart a science fiction story, a speculative fiction story. And it's great stuff. You should go out and get it if you haven't already. Also,
That
Maurice
sounds
has, you know, his second book is a short story collection where it's all realist fiction set in real world New Orleans, and it's brilliant. They're all short stories, and like the books are very much related to each other and depend on each other, but one would be shelved in one part of the bookstore and one would be shelved in another part. But it's brilliant stuff.
sounds I don't know if this is, I want to end this on this question. Jacques, once again, thank you so much. He says, last question from him, it's to me, that I might have written a fantasy novel set in Louisiana, and does it involve chocolate, and can he have some? Yes, it was set in Louisiana, but I made up the town of Honfleur, which is a town in France, because I fell in love with that place, but I put it in, I made it as a parish in Louisiana, and it was of a chocolatier. So where she goes on adventures and she solves murders, mysteries, you know, like you do. So, and as Omar had mentioned, I make chocolate. So hence why Jacques' question. I don't know if that was supposed to be private, but now it's not. So
Book be found? Because I want that.
oh, well, let's see. I just got the proof print a couple of days ago, so it's in my hot little hands. It will be made available in print probably in the next month or so. You can find it on Amazon as well as the libraries. So Libby app, Libby, Overdrive, and Hoopla, as well as some other places. And Mark Twain House has offered to carry it before, so I may poke them and see if that offer still stands.
Yeah,
But all I can say is I love the cover. The cover is gorgeous. It's a chocolate, bits and pieces of chocolate made into look like a skull. And it's got 2 spoons to be the eyes, and it looks like the mouth. So, and there was this whole big thing that that I absolutely love, because I have it as my heroine is bisexual and she's got her female love interest. And it always reminded me of like that always annoying question when it came to people in same-sex relationships of who's the man, who's the woman kind of thing. Like it always bothered me. And, you know, I love that little cartoon that shows, you know, a knife and a fork asking that question to chopsticks. So in my, basically in my way to like kind of thumb my nose at it, I made it where it's 2 spoons. You know, the ladies are represented as 2 spoons. So all throughout the chapters, I had specifically asked, can you make it 2 spoons? Like, that's just a thing. Like, it may not mean anything to anybody else, but I need you to put 2 spoons. There's 2 spoons, and that's all you need to know. Like, spoons work just fine.
That's fantastic. I hope you'll come down and join us at the Tennessee Williams Literary Festival sometime. It's a great time, and they would love to have you, I'm sure. Oh, that reminds me. The other thing that I want to plug is an organization. It's a nonprofit project called Con or Bust. It's a project of Dream Foundry, and our mission is to provide greater access to speculative fiction conventions, events, and professional development to fans and creatives of color. The World Fantasy Convention is going to be here in New Orleans in November, and so we've paid out a number of grants to get people who wouldn't otherwise be able to attend to come down and be present for it. And we are always looking for in-kind and monetary donations. I will put a link to Con or Bust's page in the chat, and we would love it for you to pitch in if you can.
Thank you. Is there anything else that I may have missed that you want to say at the end of this? Anything?
I mean, in closing, I guess the one thing that I'll say is after Hurricane Katrina, there was a lot of talk about whether New Orleans was worth saving and why. And the answer to that, in my view, has always been that absolutely yes. And the reason is New Orleans itself, the people, not just the culture or what it has produced and influenced over the world for generations. And there's been a lot of that, but all of the sense of community that is in this novel is something taken directly from my experience living here. The folks in New Orleans are wonderful. The city has not been swept away by gentrification just yet. People are hanging on, and it's really worth it to visit. You know, we have our problems. There's a lot of crime, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of dysfunction, but the city itself still stands proud and deserves your attention and your admiration.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you tonight. And thank you for, just sharing your time with us. And thank you for sharing your thoughts, your stories, your characters. And now we have even more things to read, especially as it's getting colder here on the Northern Hemisphere. So many wonderful stories of yours that we get to discover. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Omar, take it away. Oh, can't hear you.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Alex and Nikki. Yes, we're all looking, those of us who have not read The Ballad of Perilous Graves are very much looking forward to reading it. And thank you to our audience for joining us this evening. If you joined late or want to go back and rewatch the program, you can do so on our YouTube channel. You can also check out our events page to see all our upcoming programs, and I'm going to put that in the chat. Feel free to open that up before we close out the webinar, just so you can bookmark those pages. And we put links to buy Alex's book, to donate, take tours in the Mark Twain House, along with, you'll see Alex put his Spotify playlist, and I think Jacques put Nikki, the title of Nikki's book in the chat as well. So, yeah, so if you want to go ahead and copy and paste those somewhere. Anyways, it was so great to have you both here, and I hope you and our audience have a great evening.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Take care.